All right, this is Talkin Blues, and I am Michael Ward-Bergeman, and I am a musician and play the accordion and some other instruments, and I'm grateful to be here today.
Did you start with the accordion or did you start with the piano?
Did I start with the accordion? I think I probably did start with the accordion, although I didn't pick up the accordion until I was 20, not well, late teens, and but I was a musician, I think, since birth. And why I say I think I started with the accordion is because one of my earliest childhood memories is playing reed organ, a plastic little reed organ with a fan in it. And I remember it had the buttons like an accordion, like with a chord, and I would just sit and press the chord and just be fascinated by the harmonies of the chords. I would just listen to the chords. And then I started playing because it had a keyboard part too. And I had heard that my grandfather, who I'm named after, he died right before I was born, so it was a whole traumatic thing. And then I came along. He had played accordion as an amateur, having Polish ancestry. So I always heard about him playing the accordion to liven up parties and stuff. So I think it was planted in me maybe, like before birth or what have you. But I didn't get to pick one up until my late teens. I played violin and piano before that. All through school, I took violin. It started in elementary school. And then I got interested in the piano and was in music from second grade on, like a formal music education.
So mainly classical music.
Yes and no. I mean, yes, the violin for sure was classically trained. It was like the Suzuki method early on. And then, it was a good deal of classical music, at elementary, middle school, and high school level. But I had a great middle school music program that we performed all over at Disney World, the World's Fair, and they did popular music too. And I was in band, chorus, and like I did everything. So yeah, a good deal of classical music, but popular music and jazz as well. So I was pretty well rounded.
And this was in Long Island?
Yeah, Long Island, correct. Yeah, Medford, Patchogue, Medford, Long Island.
At what point did you think you wanted to be a musician?
I don't know if it was a wanting. Like I said, I really, remember. I mean, I don't know how old I was. I think the thing was in my playpen, the organ. I just remember being transfixed by that sound. So, then when you get into school with guidance counselors and everything else, you got to make it. I chose to do this. I'm going to do this. I don't know. I don't think it was a wanting. It was a burning. I mean, and maybe it's hard to say what I was thinking back then. Maybe it's not accurate, but the way it feels now is like it's kind of how I suspect the quote unquote reality works, is like it's not, time is an illusion, and it's just one moment, and I'm running around in circles getting to know myself, and there was that thing in the center of me that connected with the vibration of that sound, which also related to my DNA and heritage through my grandfather. And it wasn't like I wanted to be a musician. It's like, that was an aspect of myself that I was destined to explore.
So you went to Berkeley at what age?
I went when I was 25, I think, around 25, middle 20s.
Okay, so you discovered the accordion before that. How did that happen?
Yeah, that's another magical thing. Like I said, I always heard my grandfather played. I graduated high school, and I was very into juggling, and clowning when I got out of high school, like towards the end of high school. And I had some early childhood experience with clowning too, with Ringling Brothers Circus. Being transfixed. I remember the clowns came and got me, and they put me in a wagon at Madison Square Garden, and we went around the center ring, and it was early, like I was like 3 or 4 years old. So I started teaching kids at an elementary school that was in the Patrick Medford School District with these two visionary teachers, an art and music teacher that started this program called Center Ring, which I always loved because it was center ring, but I was also doing this thing called centering prayer at that time. So I was amazed. Centering and center ring. Anyway, I realized I needed a portable instrument to lead the kids around and do stuff. I was like, I always heard my grandfather play it, and my mom. We went to some yard sales. I remember the yard sale. I remember the street it was on, and we got my first accordion there. And the minute I picked it up, I knew. I was like, oh my God. And I was looking back, I'm glad I didn't have it in high school, because I would have probably not made it out of high school, because we did all kinds of crazy things with music in high school that got us in trouble and stuff. And if I had an accordion, I would have been on rollerblading through the hallways with the accordion. Would have gotten in a lot of trouble. So it was good that that didn't happen until right after. So that was the moment I picked it up and started to get into it right away.
And that connection, was that the same connection that fascinated you with your little organ?
I don't know if I made that. I definitely connected with my grandfather when I picked it up, and I knew. I was like, oh wow, this is like, makes total sense. I think on some level, I don't know if I consciously recognized that, but pretty soon I think I realized how amazing it was to have an instrument that vibrates over your heart. And so that was even more powerful than the thing as a kid, because that was externalized from my body, but it was still very strong. I don't want to diminish how strong. I mean, for me to remember pressing those buttons and I remember just listening like to this thing. And it was static too, because it was a fan. It was a plastic organ. So the thing that's amazing about the accordion is the reeds vibrate over your heart and your chest, and you have lungs that are like close to your physical lungs that give you an expressive capability to breathe. The instrument breathes with an externalized pair of lungs. So yeah, I think if not consciously, certainly on a deep subconscious level, I made that connection right away.
And did the instrument come to you easily? I mean, based on your background with piano and violin?
Yeah, it did. The keyboard aspect of it, and the thing that surprisingly came to me really pretty easily was the bellows. Like, not being confused by that was a gift, because that I see, like, with the people that play, like, and students I've had along the way, that can be a challenge. The thing that always did my head in was the left-hand side with the buttons, because it's arranged differently it's not chromatic. It's the main system that I use, the Stradella system, is arranged in fifths with chords. So that took a minute to wrap my head around. I'm still wrapping my head around it. So yeah, it came easy. It felt natural. It didn't feel foreign at all.
So easy enough that within a few years you're going to Berkeley for this?
Well, no. I mean, I was performing with it with the kids right away, which was very cool, But to be honest, and surprisingly to me to say it, the accordion was an afterthought to bring to Berkeley, because Berkeley, for me, was about music synthesis and piano performance. That was I was a dual major, and I knew that going in, because I was very serious about piano playing, and I was very, very serious about music synthesis.
Can you explain that? What is music?
Well, music from the time I was in middle school, my main mentor musically and really relating to music spiritually was a man. He's still around, thank God. His name's Tom Pigott. He was a really important figure in the early evolution of music synthesis. We was around Bob Moog and was a demonstrator and clinician for ARP synthesizers in the 60s, when these things were just coming out. And he lived in my little town. And I met him, my mom, and I started taking lessons with him with synthesizers. And it was a whole world. So I was either going to go to Cirque du Soleil school, which I think is in Montreal, or to Berkeley. And it just turned out that I went to Berkeley. And when that happened, he said, I have a former student of mine who's up there. We're going to go up and visit him. And he introduced me to his former student. And then Dr. Richard Boulanger, he became my mentor at Berkeley. I spent a lot of time with him at Berkeley. And it's not called music synthesis anymore. It's like production. But when I was there, it was called the music synthesis department. You studied specific things about synthesizers and sound and acoustics and creating, different ways to realize sound production. And that was, half of my time at Berkeley was that.
So you told me that you had worked in a piano bar.
Oh,
during that
yeah,
time.
Jake Ivory's. Man, that's like the other side. Here I was, because of course, Dr. Richard, you can imagine somebody that's named Dr. Richard Boulanger waved me into his most complicated class. He was like doing things at MIT with, I'm sure, like we're vaguely in touch still today, and he's still, a forward thinker. But at the time, there was this software synthesis language called C-Sound, which I don't even know what software synthesis means at the time. I just was like into synthesizers and making weird sounds. And he waved me into this class, which was like the most advanced class that he taught. I don't even know how to turn on a computer. So here I am. I thought I was going to sink, but I wound up spending a lot of time in the labs and doing these things. You write all this code to like make sound, and the computers were slow. You have to do a 3-minute piece. It took like 10 hours to compile, and then there'd be 2 mistakes in it. You'd have to So anyway, as I'm doing that kind of work and studying all this jazz and piano at Berkeley, and then I go and work at Jake Ivory's 4 nights a week, which was the polar. In many ways, not every way, but it was the opposite thing. It was more like crowd control, because it was a dueling piano bar. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to one of those. They're all over the world, and a lot of them are in the United States. Jake Ivory's is no longer around, but basically you have 2 piano players sitting across from each other, and they start up at 8, 9 o'clock and play till 2 in the morning, nonstop. You usually on the Friday and Saturday night there would be 4 piano players. You would have your partner that would sit across from you. You'd play for an hour, and then the other guys would tap you, and you'd leave, and no break. Like it would be seamless. They would tap you and literally rotate in, and then you had an audience of I don't know how many people. I think it was like a 300-400 capacity room, that all these bachelorette parties coming down from the Boston suburbs. And there were bachelorette parties fighting with each other, like literally cat fights, people's heads going through walls.
But musically, what are you playing? What
we're
happened?
playing whatever they told us to, which was because the people would write their requests on napkins and put a bill in there and throw it onto the piano. So it was all, of course, rock and roll piano music, and not just piano music, but rock and roll. There was some comedy involved that I was never super into, because I was just, the musical element. But there was some really, really amazing entertainers there, and I think I learned a lot. What I learned, I can't tell you exactly, but it was insane. It was completely nuts. Like, we had. The women would take their bras off. We had the pipe that ran along the back of the stage, and there was probably like $5,000 worth of bras hung up on it. And then when they got too many bras, they would pull all the bras down, put them in trash bags, throw them out, and we'd start all over again. I have so many stories from that time. I mean, we could have a whole podcast about things that happened at that club, but I don't know if you want to get into that.
Well, what I'm interested in knowing is at that point, you're going to Berkeley, you're working at nights, playing piano.
Yeah.
What do you imagine your musical career to be, and what did you hope to get out of Berkeley?
Right. Well, when I went to Berkeley, I imagined that I would. Part of me was like, Billy Joel was a huge hero of mine because he was from Long Island. He played piano. He sang music. You know, he wrote his own music, and I grew up with him. So he was like a big thing. So I think I modeled myself off of him, like imagined myself. It's part of me was that. Then I had the music synthesis angle, which was something completely different. So I had that element, and I was really into some progressive rock bands and you know, different kind of music too, like Tomita. I don't know if you remember Tomita, but I had every Tomita record and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So then, like, soundtrack. So I thought, you know, I'll go to Berkeley and maybe I didn't major in film scoring, but I thought it would be a possibility. You know, like, I'll write soundtrack music. And then because I had already started doing it to an extent on Long Island, I thought I could also be like a session musician, touring musician in a rock band because I enjoyed rock and roll music and grew up playing it. So it made sense everywhere where I wound up. It's like it almost catered to every element of that. What I hoped to get out of Berkeley was I felt I was really deficient in some technical aspects of music, like how to notate music and like really write it, which I felt was important. Even you know, ultimately it isn't. I mean, but at the time I was like, I need to master that technical thing, which I did. Berkeley was great as a technical thing. Berkeley was just great overall. I think, you know, I just was hungry for knowledge, and that's what I wanted to get. The specific thing was like notation, I can remember, but more than that was like I was very, very hungry. I was lucky that I was so hungry because the hunger kind of led to a lot of real revelations and things that I could have never imagined for myself.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, the first thing is like, okay, so you asked about the accordion. I took the accordion there as an afterthought because I wasn't, you know, I was like, I'm a great piano player and it's a music synthesis. You know, the accordion is some stupid instrument. That is, I mean, it wasn't that, but it wasn't far from there. I mean, it wasn't far from that. I really did take it as an afterthought. But as it turned out, I was the only accordion player at Berkeley at that time. And I got involved with the man who is a real super mentor of mine, who's now a colleague of mine, and that I love. He's one of really my closest friends, and even transcends friends. Jamie Haddad, who is a master world percussionist and drummer, and just spiritual thinker about rhythm, and he had for lack of a better word, world music classes where he got, because there was a huge international population at Berkeley. Berkeley, I believe at the time, and maybe still is, had the largest international student population of any university. And part of the thing with that is that the international students were required to present the music from the cultures that they were from as part of their scholarships and whatever else. And most of those cultures had accordion in their music. So I would get calls from people from over. I couldn't tell you where a lot of these places were on the map. Now, let alone tell you what to play on the instrument. But because I was the only person there, they were stuck with me. And it's like the Woody Allen thing. I always think about, you know, success is like 90% showing up. I always showed up on time and was like, what do I do? You know, and I had to deal with, you know, feeling totally unqualified to play with these virtuoso people that were just like, you know, I was always like, and that led to the Buena Vista Social Club had come out during that time. So the world music thing was really exploding, and they started a world music thing in Boston, like a ticket subscription thing that would curate concerts of musicians from around the world. So I signed up, and because I was making so much money at the piano bar, I just threw, like, I was like, man, I just threw all kinds of money at that. I was able to go to those concerts and meet all those people and stuff. So
Is that where the love of folk music from around the world comes from?
from what?
From playing with all these different musicians at Berkeley.
For sure, was the opening of my mind to all these other places that I couldn't have imagined, and music that I couldn't have imagined, and being around Jamie and him being such a cheerleader for all that music and celebrating people and the cultures that they're from. You know, that really lit a fire in me, like that hunger. And then I was going to those concerts. I met the first kind of real deep, mature, I don't know if you want to call it mature, but love affair that I had. I saw a group called Tariff de Haiduks, which they were huge in the 90s. They were a Roma band from Romania, and I had never seen anything like it. And the accordions were a featured instrument in their group. It was like 13 men playing all kinds of instruments. And I saw them, and then I was so mesmerized by them that I went. They had like these other things that they would, smaller events that weren't concerts, like dances and things. And I went to a place in Concord, Massachusetts. They were having a dance, and I saw the guy who was like who I thought was the best accordion player. And as I was leaving, I said, if I run into that guy, I'm going to ask him for a lesson. I was walking out the door, and he was coming in, and I was like, yeah, can I get a lesson? And he didn't speak English at all. And he's like, come, the tour manager, who was from Belgium, translated, and he's like, he wrote down his hotel. He said, 11 a.m. tomorrow. And I went, and I'll never forget this. I could see it. This is like, I don't know how many years ago. I went to the hotel, and it was the day like the U.S. had bombed Serbia or something, whatever was going on, pick your bomb. And I saw all the guys from the band in the lobby. Each one of them had a newspaper, and they were just like reading it, and the look on their faces was just like. And then he saw me, and he said, let's go. We went up to his room. Guy blew my mind. We had like a 5-hour accordion lesson. Didn't speak. We didn't even speak the same language. And this was at the end of Berkeley. Right at the end. I was just about ready to graduate. I think I insulted my Richard Poulon, my mentor, because I said, man, everything that I learned at Berkeley, I said, this thing blew away everything. Which I was just so excited about it. I learned a lot from Dr. Richard Poulon. I mean, I can't give him enough credit. He changed the way I think about sound itself through C sound. But that's another thing. So anyway, I fell in love. His name is Yanitsa. He's a star, like in Romania, as a Roma musician. Him and his wife. He stopped playing with the Tariff de Dukes. He has a band with his wife, who's also a Lautori, which are these from generations of musicians. And I applied for a Fulbright to go study with him, which I didn't get. But I wound up. The universe brought us together many times after that. Yeah.
So is that the moment where you became more of an accordion player than a piano player?
Interesting question.
Was there a moment like that where...
I don't know, because the piano was so early and it was such a relationship. I kind of taught myself piano for a long time before I started taking formal lessons. And so it's a special part of myself. But, I think what happened is, for sure, it made me like, I started practicing more on the lessons that he gave me. And, I started writing on it. So it definitely started to take over my life. And as I always say, I just held on to the accordion, and it dragged me through all this stuff. But what really... willingly. So what happened is I was touring with different fledgling rock bands and things and doing sessions as a synthesizer, keyboard, piano player. And then I started to get these gigs in the quote unquote classical world playing accordion, because what happened, oh yeah, this is the key moment, obviously. This is the moment that, what happened was, so I met Yanitza. Okay, I met Yanitza. I was still working at the piano bar. I started playing a lot of accordion. Then I got hit in the head with a chocolate cock at the piano bar. I got so angry from that I slept in my bathtub, because my girlfriend at the time, she like laughed when I told her, just like you did. Now I can see the humor in it. Then I didn't see, because I got hit while I was playing the piano in front of 300 people. It was off of the top of this cake. And I was so angry that I gave myself a kidney stone. And I knew I had to quit the piano bar. I had no idea what I was going to do. But I was like, I'm done. I can't. Oh, how much? He couldn't get more humiliated. So I quit the piano bar. And then like right after that, I got this call from the music synthesis director who had seen my final project at Berkeley, which involved synthesizers and accordion and piano. And he said, there's some guy who's looking for, he's a up-and-coming composer in Boston that's looking for someone to help him with his setup. And, his computer setup and doing some stuff. And I'm not interested, because I had like a lot of friends that became frustrated musicians working as engineers, and I had seen it, and I was like, man, I don't want to do it. But I argued with this guy. He's like, you got to call. So finally, I'm like, all right, I'll take the call, whatever. I'll call a guy. I don't know if he called me or. So the guy, it turned out, was this guy Mark Gray, who was the sound engineer for the Kronos Quartet. I didn't know any of this at the time, who this guy was. So we had this conversation, and it was the same thing. He's like, yeah, they gave me your number, and, this guy needs help. And I was like, well, listen, I said, to be honest with you, I didn't want to take this gig. And the guy at Berkeley told me I should call you. And because I've been practicing, I'm obsessed with the accordion, because I met these people from Romania, and this guy Yanitza. And he starts laughing. He goes, oh, that's funny. We just got back from Romania with the Kronos Quartet and this composer. We just recorded with that group. I'll be right over. And I went down and met my dear friend, and who's been my friend for years, Osvaldo Golihov, who's a celebrated master composer. And I helped him with his technical stuff. But I was also working on the accordion, and it kind of just bled into our relationship. And I helped him do some demos for a big piece he was working on that became a massive success for him. And really, he was already on the map, but it really cemented his place as a celebrated 20th century composer. His Passion of St. Mark. And I did a demo for the group that he was working with on accordion, and he's like, oh, we'll replace it with something else. When the woman heard it, she was like, what, are you crazy? Because it was like built around a Latin American interpretation of it. She goes, the accordion's critical in the Latin America. You have to have the accordion player. So he said, well, I guess you're going to be on the gig. And then that led to a whole thing.
So at this point, are you a good accordion player?
No. They thought I was. He obviously thought I was good enough to like do whatever. But I didn't even have a real serious instrument. The instrument that I had was one that was given to me by one of the piano players, Paul Levesque, at Jake Ivory's. He said, "Oh, I have an accordion." It was a really nice accordion. It sounded nice. But it wasn't like a super serious instrument. And you know, I barely, I didn't. The way I mean, these people were so because he was working with people who were like from a lineage of musicians playing, you know, Latin American music, and they were all from Latin America, and not all of them, but most of them. And if they weren't from Latin America, they had like they dedicated decades of their lives to like learning the music. I'm like a complete freak. You know, was
But
like,
I mean, do you have your own style or your own?
oh no, man, I'm still working out. I don't even. I mean, I think you could now say at this point in my life that I have the you know, I have a foundation for a style. You know, you hear the distinctiveness of these people. When you start to get into folk music in particular, people that have lived this stuff and come from a lineage of musicians that have like distilled this stuff, man, my distillation process has been chaotic and like, you know, haphazard and, you know, so anyway, you know, I think I don't say I certainly belong there on a spiritual level, I think, because I meditated and prayed through those performances. Like I was very, very grounded in a spiritual way that I think connected me to the music, and I truly love the people that I admired. I was mesmerized. To this day, I'm still mesmerized by all those musicians. So that perhaps is why I got the ticket to go into that world, and I was able to come up with some things that Osvaldo thought were musically valuable enough, that were very unique for the accordion, the sound of it. I did have a moment. This is an important moment too that I remember clearly, like the chord moment for when I was a kid. I had a microphone inside the accordion that this guy had given to me, and I started messing around with some electronic gear that I had. I was sitting in my studio apartment in Boston, and I had a speaker that I was facing, and I put the thing through it, and I started messing around, and I did this thing with the low end of the accordion that I was like, what is that? It moved me, like physically moved my pants. You know, I could feel the vibration of it. And that became one of the things that Osvaldo wrote into the piece and became, you know, kind of. So that, in that sense, that was a style that I had that was unique to me, as far as I know, you know. But as far as being I was certainly a creative accordion player, but I wasn't, you know, anything to write home about as far as technical.
Well, I think it served you well, though.
Served me well, yeah, of course. I created something that was useful. You know, that's what we all want, you know, to be useful. So that was cool. And then, so you asked, so through that, you know, eventually I started getting a lot more gigs in that world. And I was able to let go of the whole dream of being Billy Joel and, you know, being a session keyboard player and touring with rock bands, because it just didn't even make sense. It was also much more exciting. So I just hugged the accordion, and it transported me through all these worlds, and I wound up going all over the world, meeting people that if you would have told me that I would have been playing with Yo-Yo Ma and hanging out with him, I would have laughed my ass off when I was like on Long Island studying classical music, because my entry for the piano, the thing that I sent to them was the Mephisto Waltz, which is a pretty serious piano piece that I worked on for like a year. That's what I sent to Berkeley. So I was, you know, into classical music. But I didn't consider myself, you know, a classical pianist. I mean, probably did at the time, but I wasn't. I mean, so if you would have said, oh, yeah, you're going to be playing a Tanglewood with Yo-Yo Ma, I would have said, yeah, right. On the accordion. I would have laughed. I would have laughed so hard. I was like, yeah, that's a good joke.
Okay, so how did that happen?
Well, that's Osvaldo. You know, it all kind of, a lot of stuff comes back to him. You know, he, through the working on The Passion and then another piece called Ire, he's like, oh, you know, I got commissioned to write this piece for Yo-Yo Ma and the Boston Symphony, and I want to add accordion to it. And the things that I was doing, I kept doing creative things with the accordion from a sound design perspective. So with that piece, I came up with some other stuff that was useful. And before you knew it, there we were. Yo-Yo Ma walked into the room. And what was amazing, this is why I don't believe in any, it's good to come back to. I don't know what I did. I could say I observed what I was doing and witnessed and discovered what was coming through me. But what I did, and because it's just too crazy. When I was at Berkeley, I went to the library to do some research on, acoustics and synthesis, and I watched a performance that Todd Mackover from MIT had done with Yo-Yo Ma at Tanglewood called the Hypercello. And it was like Yo-Yo had all these things hooked up to him, and there was a computer, and he'd play, the computer would play back. It was fascinating. It was like, wow, this is crazy. And then when that moment happened with the speaker, that was planted in me. I just started calling the thing the hyper accordion. It just means extended. I didn't even know what hyper meant. I think I had to look it up. So it was like, and I always get jokes. Oh, are you hyper? So I just called it that. So when he walked into the room, that's the first thing I told him. He was like, "How you doing?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I stole the name of my instrument from that thing you did with Todd McElroy." He's like, "Oh, that's funny." Yeah, so you can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's bonkers. I watched that before I knew anything about Osvaldo or anything.
What's crazy, that one phone call. I mean, I don't know if it's fair to say it changed your life, but it certainly made a difference in your life.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly did. But, I think every moment is endless and you could be changed by any moment in your life. So to give something, I don't know about like, man, it's funny. This just hit me sitting here talking about this. I've learned to listen, things come up. When in the past, I used to disregard things that would come up in me. But now I pay attention to those things. So I'm going to tell you this. Before I went to Berkeley, I worked at a nursing home in the activities department. Played a lot of music there. That wasn't my job, but I used to play for people on lunch hour. We would have to visit people that couldn't come down to lunch, that were, bedridden. And there was a woman, beautiful woman in her 40s. She had MS. And she liked to have poetry read to her. And I would go up there. I'd love reading poetry to her. She couldn't move at all. And I found out she liked Robert Frost. So I had a friend who was a poet, and he made me a tape. Robert Frost recited a bunch of his poetry. So I brought it in, and then for some reason we would always end with "The Road Not Taken," which, I had learned in high school. It's like a classic Robert Frost poem, and it's been co-opted by the culture, by the, the 12-step program, take the road less traveled. So that's the way I learned it. Robert Frost is telling us. And she would always mouth the words of the last lines of the poem. I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. It's an amazing poem. Mm-hmm. So when I was in the UK, I lived in London for 10 years, and there was a BBC program, and it talked about Robert Frost. He was actually he lived in a place called Dimmock, which strangely enough I wound up there because I used to tour around the UK It's in Gloucestershire, a tiny little place where a lot of poets at a certain time went, and that's Robert Frost went there. And supposedly he wrote the yellow wood that he talks about in the poem, which I never knew was supposedly about the daffodils, because it's an amazing place, which is why Wordsworth wrote the daffodils poem, which when I was in 5th grade, I recited that poem at a speech contest. Anyway, this program put forth, shined a light on this poem that completely blew my mind. So the poem goes, let's see if I can remember. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I, being one traveler, long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then taking the other one just as fair, and perhaps having the better claim, wanting where I forget the rest of it. It's like I debated which way am I gonna go, and I took the other one. And then I shall be telling this ages and ages hence with a sigh. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made the difference. Well, he used to go for walks with an English poet. Forget the guy's name. And that guy got sent to war. And they would write each other. And when they went on walks, the guy would always be like, which way should we go? And I guess it was like funny and maybe slightly irritating sometimes for Robert Frost that they would always like say down which path they should go. If you read the poem carefully, both roads are the same. Read it carefully. The same road. And the way that what's happening at the end is like when your grandfather tells you, when I was your age, I had to walk 100 miles to school barefoot in the snow. It's a different thing. So, and Robert Frost was pressed on this, would never say a word about it. He never explained it. He hinted at it at a couple he spoke later when he was much older at a university that he spoke at, and hinted, like he said, it's not what it appears to be. So that relates to what you just asked me, to me. Oh, this call was so important. Yes, there's no doubting that my life would have been completely different if I didn't take that phone call, but it's all the same road.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you still play the piano?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's amazing about that is I kind of let it go, just because of the accordion overtook my life, willingly so. And then when I moved to New Orleans, the first gig I got was playing piano in a small little church in the 9th Ward, which was like amazing. Just the people there, beautiful people. It was a mind-blowing experience. Welcomed me into their church and their tradition. These are people who have been, generations of celebrating their faith in this particular, way that was completely foreign to me. And they just welcomed me in right away. So that was very special to me, that piano playing could come back to me in such a profound way the minute that I moved to New Orleans.
Did you move there because of the connection to the accordion? Did it have anything to do with the tradition of the accordion?
No. And that's kind of always, people always told me I had to go to New Orleans. Really, before I even played the accordion, people would tell me that because they could hear it in my piano playing, I guess, or whatever. And there isn't really an accordion tradition in New Orleans. In Louisiana, I would argue it's the most important accordion traditions that are rooted in the United States are in Louisiana. There are European traditions that are very strong in other parts of the United States. But as far as something coming from the United States of America, Louisiana, Cajun music and Zydeco music. The accordion is the main focal point of those two styles, and they are born in the United States. Not in New Orleans; it's outside of that Lafayette area. So what happened with that is that I did this project in 2011 where I was like, I'm going to play a gig every single day and drive all over the place. And that year I went to New Orleans for the first time, and what happened there, I felt like all these other things that I was experiencing and kind of searching in a way when I fell in love with Yanitza and Roma music. And then I also had a similar thing happen with music from the northeast of Argentina called chamamé. I fell in love hard with that. And it's like, I think in the back of my mind was, why didn't I have this in Long Island? Because I would, like Yanitza's father made him learn all this. We would put him in the closet and make him learn all these things as a kid. It's like, man, imagine if I had that. Why didn't I have, anybody? Our kind of culture was going to the mall and maybe getting into the city to see, some concert that we weren't really interested in, some classical as a kid. There was no real strong, I did have a beautiful musical experience all from elementary school through high school. That was great, but it didn't seem like that was as strong as the traditions that I was experiencing in these other cultures. When I experienced New Orleans, I'm like, holy crap, this is where it is in my country, my culture. It was all dumped in New Orleans. So that, and I went to many, many places, as you might. I drove all over, hit just about every state in the United States, and I went to other countries. And that New Orleans was head and shoulders above every other experience. So it stayed with me. And, we didn't force it. My wife had some opportunities. She was finished her master's in Florida. And she had some opportunities that we, explored and were hoping would happen that didn't. And we got to a point, it was like, we knew we didn't want to stay in Gainesville as much as we loved it because we were still young and wanted to, get somewhere that was more exciting. So we were like, well, let's try New Orleans. So it came back. It's funny. It just was a seed. I really didn't force it. And neither she wasn't really even into it. But I had supported her through trying these other things that would have brought us to a bunch of different places in the United States. And when they didn't pan out, it was like, all right, well, let's try this now. And so when I got there, that was, here's what happened, and this is when it really hit. This is why this was the experience that elevated New Orleans to like just a skyrocketing, towered above everywhere else that I visited that year. I didn't play on the street until I got to New Orleans because, I had some gigs set up that year, but a lot of times I would have to convince people to let me play. And the point of it was to play as diverse a range of venues as possible, traditional and non-traditional venues. I played hardware stores, prisons, hospitals.
Can I ask you? So when you decide to do this Gig 365 project in 2011, what's the genesis of that idea? How do you decide I'm going to play a gig everywhere? Every day for a year.
Well, what happened was there's a few things. The main thing that I remember is that I was touring with a trio at that time, Groenbox, in the UK, that was more or less based in the UK. And we had booked like over 30 consecutive dates. It might have even been 2 months. I can't remember how many it was. It was a lot of dates, though, all over the UK and elsewhere. Every day. Like it was at least one gig a day, sometimes two, maybe even 3 gigs a day. So at the height of that, it was so amazing to me that I turned to all the other guys. I said, what if we did this for a year? And they were like, you insane. There's no way. So I was like, all right. So I was just like, whatever. So then I kept thinking about it. And, I was moving back to the States from the UK at that time. And I wasn't really living anywhere. I was bouncing all over South America because my wife's girlfriend at the time was from Venezuela. And I was into like Romania. I had a little bed sit in London. The floor was like I would just stop and empty my suitcase out and then leave. So I was also interested in plant medicine. I read a lot of books on shamanism and for years I was interested, like I started hearing about this thing called ayahuasca. And I did a lot of research and I found a place that I felt I would be comfortable with going to Peru and doing this thing that's used as a plant medicine for, by the indigenous peoples. And when I was there, I did the ceremony and then I opted to, they have a thing called a diet, a dieta, that you can go into the jungle and be by yourself for like 2 weeks and get other plant medicines. And I did that. And it was there that I like realized, okay, it was 2000. I celebrated my 40th birthday by myself in the jungle. And it was there that I knew, like, I was like, all right. It wasn't like any kind of practical, like, oh, I just knew that it was going to happen. How and whatever else, I didn't know. So between those two things, like the Grown Box thing kind of planted this idea of it. And then I knew that I would actually do it in the middle of 2010. And then I moved close to my dad and he helped me prepare for it. Like I bought a van, like a new van that I knew I would travel in. We customized it and did all kinds of stuff and did some dry runs. I started trying to book as much as possible. I got 2 months. I was able to book 2 months. And then after that, it was like, but I wrote a mission statement, which I can't remember, but it was like, cause I got a lot of questions. It was funny. Kevin and a bunch of the other people were asking me about that project this week, which is funny because I don't talk about it a lot. So I would get a lot of comments, like from close friends, like, what's the show? Where's the CD? And I was just like, I knew it wasn't about any of that stuff. And if you read the mission statement, it really reflects that. I mean, there was maybe one thing, I don't even know if I put it in the mission statement, like about, I hope I can get more interested in my work, whatever the hell it was. I didn't even know what my work was really, my body of work. What the real curiosity was what does it mean to make music? And because I was also doing like all these classical gigs and they were amazing and stuff, but it's like, is this what it is about? Selling as many tickets, making as much money, performing for people, and what's going on? So the criteria was like I had to play at least 35 minutes for at least one person. That was a gig. Now I played gigs for probably 5,000 people that year, and I did play gigs for like very small groups of people too. And it was also about playing as diverse a range of venues as possible so that you could meet as many different people as possible and experience what music was like for them. And I had a certain amount of music that I felt comfortable playing that I would adapt to where I was, both the way that I played it and what I was playing. It was kind of like the music was a key that opened up different worlds to go into. And I couldn't really imagine anything else that would afford me that opportunity. I couldn't imagine if I baked cookies and went around to these places and I had some very deep experiences with people that I only met that one time and never met again. Like where they had deep emotional responses to like being celebrating music together.
Oh, you played at a correctional institute?
Yeah, that was unbelievable. I can't. But let me get back to the New Orleans thing because that's where this came from. So I was Gig 365 is like the middle of the thing, and so I didn't play on the street because I didn't want people to think, well, what's this guy doing? You know, he's just playing on the street. Anybody could do it. But when I got to New Orleans, I did ask around and try to get gigs, but they're like, this is a city full of musicians. Everybody's looking for a gig. You just came here today and want to play somewhere. So I learned that playing on the street was a gig there. So I was fine doing it. So I started playing on the street, and right away I met this guy, Malcolm Morris, who played bass drum. He just showed up the first night I was there. Rode up on his bike, played about 30 seconds with me. I have the moment on film because my wife was filming across the street with a little camera. And so Malcolm would always show up wherever I was, which was amazing. We started playing together. Like, we didn't call. He would just show up. Yeah, I call him the heartbeat of New Orleans. Because you could tell. Like, never would I imagine that I could tell somebody's, like, who it was by the way they hit the bass drum. That was like, how could I know that? I could tell. Malcolm had a certain thing. So we were playing on a corner one night, and people coming by, they put a box, you put a box out and people put money in. People, 5 people listening, dancing, fooling around. Then this guy he had 2 trumpets. He had like a trumpet, regular trumpet, then he had a long trumpet with like a purple, just like these pants, purple sash on it that looked like, in the regal. This guy shows up. He reeked of cigarettes and booze. He starts playing within 30 seconds to a minute. There's 200 people surrounding us. I didn't know what he was playing, but there I am. I'm playing. I'm like, okay, we're playing. I didn't even know what the hell was going on. It was just like the most swinging, spontaneous thing that there's no way to explain it. So I'm like mesmerized. We finish. We have a box full of money. A box full of tons. I don't know how many. It was hundreds of dollars. So he's counting the money. I don't even know his name. And I'm like, I got to say something. I got to be like, man, I don't even want to give me $10. Because we would have made, probably like 20, $30 between me and the bass drum. And there was a fiddle player that was messing around with us too. So I go to him. I said, hey, man, listen, we wouldn't have made anywhere near this amount without you. I said, so take half or whatever you want and then split. And he just looked at me like I had 10 heads. He's like, we don't do that here. So that right away, he exploded a paradigm. Because he was obviously the headliner. He was the star. Where I come from, that guy makes the most money. It's all about money. It's like, and that guy would most likely be asking for the most money where I come from. Well, 100% of the time. And the guy was black. I wasn't around a lot of African Americans, but like, I think there were hints of racism with people that I grew up with. My family was never like that, thank God. But I was vaguely around it, So, these things get planted. You're like, oh, yeah, black people, just like the gypsies. It's funny. The Roman people, like when I started going, people told me, watch out for your money. Because it irritates me so much because, listen, I'm telling you something. When I used to I was in a London club with them, with Yanitza. They were sound checking and hanging out. It was before the show started. And there's like 13 of them, and they have like a little entourage. They called me to play. I left my wallet on the table. And I went and play. And I come back. And the wallet's not there. And Yanitza comes up to me, and he goes, and he gave me my wallet. He's like, don't leave your wallet on the table. Like, he was like, you stupid. He didn't even speak the language, but I was like, what, are you stupid? So I would tell people, I'm like, that's not what I experienced. These people were amazing with me. I'm sure there are Roma people that steal, just like there's white people that steal and everybody else. Anyway, so the fact that he could say this to me immediately was like, what's going on? You know, we split things equally. So that, and here I am, I don't even know what the hell he was playing. Plus, I don't look like him. I don't come from where he's never seen me before. He's never met me, knows nothing about me. The instrument has nothing, my accordion has nothing to do with the tradition that he's obviously been born into. Blew my mind. Then I get another bright idea. I should have stopped there. Because while he was playing, he had CDs that he was selling too. So like he would be playing like, you know, it was insane, like the way he managed the crowd. So then I get the bright idea. I'm like, well, geez, let me at least tell him I'll buy one of his CDs. So I go back. He's still counting the money. All right, man, if you're not going to let me, you know, if you're not going to take, you know, my suggestion to take whatever you want, at least let me buy one of your CDs. Again, he looks at me like I'm the dumbest guy on earth, and he goes, I'm not on these. Now, it's the only time in my life, I think, where something like this has happened. My brain did not even understand what he meant for like, it felt like an eternity, but it was probably like maybe 15 seconds for me to figure out that he was selling people CDs like that was just generic New Orleans music that he probably found at a friend's attic just to make some money. Now, to me, this was the bigger thing. Because remember, I had people ask me, where was my CD when I started the Gig 365? It was like, and at that time, for me, your CD was like the most important thing you could have. I didn't, a CD, like my music was like, I couldn't think of too many other things that were more important than that. A representative of my work and like, you know, look at this. This is look what I did. So that totally exploded. I'm 40 years old, 41. I felt like I went back to like preschool. It was like he blew up every single thing that I thought about everything in those moments. It's funny that I didn't force my way back to New Orleans, but I think with my wife, like I wanted to support her because she's amazing. So like, and it's beautiful that it happened naturally, and we had our son in New Orleans. Like the experience that I had in New Orleans, I mean, it was destined. You know, no question about it that it was supposed to happen. So, but it's funny because I mean, I probably should. I mean, it's amazing I didn't just say, "All right, I'm not doing any more Gig 365." I'm like, cancel everything. And that is what happened, as we spoke a little bit about before. I did eventually lose myself completely in New Orleans, and those people. Kenneth is I love Kenneth.
Did you ever have a time when you couldn't get a gig in the 365 days? Was there ever
No,
pressure?
No. There was one moment. What would happen is I was very self-conscious at first about going into places. Like I would get a feeling, I would drive past the place and be like, I need to go in there. And it would be like a hair salon. And I'd be like, I'm not going in there. What are you, fucking crazy? But I learned, I made a commitment. I was like, if I drive past a place and feel a pull that I'm supposed to go in there, I have to go in and ask. And I learned what to wear, how to explain what I was doing, and eventually it got better and better. There was only one time where I couldn't get a gig, and I went was in Louisiana in Cajun country, and I went and I was camping. I did a lot of camping that year in the van, and I went and I played by the bayou, but there were these two ladies in the camper next door to me, and they listened, but it wasn't like they were. I just played hoping somebody was listening. Like I did, and then I met them the next day. These were two amazing ladies. They were in their 80s. They drove a huge Winnebago. They were like, "We heard you last night, and we were wondering what was going on, and it was great music." So I was like, "Thank God," because then that would have been a failed. I would have failed. But other than that, that's the only time I walked around, because rehearsals didn't count as a gig either. Like one thing that I come back to a lot because it was just so funny is I was playing with Yo-Yo out in Eugene, Oregon. I think it might have been part of the Bach Festival. And, we had a rehearsal, so I had to go get a gig. And I went around. I went to a bar. It was in Springfield, close to Eugene. Went to a bar. They weren't taking what I was offering. And I walk out of the bar and I see this place called Our Sewing Room. What the heck is that? I'm gonna go ask them. I walk in this place and it's all these ladies sewing, and immediately the acoustics were dead because there was fabric from the wall. It was like totally acoustically dead, so quiet. I walk in and there's a guy in a t-shirt reading the paper with his legs up. It's like a movie behind the desk. And I'm like, hey, I give him my spiel. He's barely looking at me. He's like, you have to ask my wife. And she's like sewing over there. So I'm like, I don't know. She's like, yeah, go ahead. So I'm like playing like all this really quiet classical music. And like, because it was like I said, it wasn't about, hey, I'm here. Here's the show. That was not what that year was about. So I'm quietly playing. I play for like 45 minutes. I finish up. And they were like, She was like, that was great. She goes, but I thought you were going to play some Zydeco. So I'm like, are you kidding? I got the accordion back out, and they were dancing. It was just awesome because it was like the opposite of what I thought it was going to be about, and they were just really cool. So, no, I didn't. I was blessed that I made that, was able to, fall into the right places to have the experiences. And the best gigs were really the ones that happened on the day.
Tell me about the last gig.
The last gig was kind of a letdown, funny enough. It's kind of funny. I had played, I was in the Everglades early on in January. I'd come back because I started in Venezuela with my wife. And we came back to Florida. She went back to school. It was like in January. And I went and I stumbled into this place called Goodland, Florida, which is on a shell mound that from the Calusa Indians made, like the town, the little town itself. And I had an amazing gig at this place, and we kept in touch. I wound up playing the people who own the bar, a wedding in Connecticut. It was like insane. So I was so close with them that I made the last gig there. And some people came, friends and family came, and it was, the time around that gig was great. I played at Naples Botanical Garden, which was close to there, like I think the day before. That was amazing. And I also played the Coral Castle. You know about Coral Castle? This guy made this castle. It's like the pyramids. These multiple ton blocks of coral. He made a castle in Florida. Ed Leedskallen is his name. He's from Latvia or something. They'd have no idea how he did it. And he said, I know how they built the pyramids. It's like not a conspiracy. It's like really crazy, the place. So I managed to get a gig there. Anyway, I played at this restaurant. And what happened is it makes total sense that it was like this. Because like I said, it really wasn't about like the endurance factor of it. Although I almost did think I was having a heart attack a couple times because it was just so busy. And I never really rested properly. Like I was always like traveling or doing whatever. But It wasn't about the endurance, and it wasn't about me even finish. Like, it was about the whole arc of the whole thing, the vibe of it. So there was another guy there who, like, that was close with the family, and he was playing New Year's there. But they wanted to have me too. They were happy to have me. And if I would have read it better, I mean, I don't regret it because everything was perfect, even when things weren't. I think he kind of felt like, who is this guy coming into where I play every New Year's Eve? So it was a little strange, but that was just, it's like a blip of a thing.
How did you feel when it was done? And then what do you walk away with?
Well, I'm still figuring that out. The big thing that I felt relief, thank God it's over. I mean, it was, exhausting. I thought I was going to take a month off, but I actually went right back to work. Like, I had a gig right after that, like within a few weeks. But the big thing, and I've expressed this, what I suspect that it was about, the universe, like, was like, okay, I have some amazing stories. It was a mind-blowing year and all this thing. But the universe was like, oh, you think that's cool that you did a year making music every day. Now I'm going to take you to a place where the people have been making music every day since they were kids. And that's Kenneth, the guy on the corner. And the whole crew of people that, like, are my family down there.
So this is the Sinners and Saints of Jackson
the Saints
Square.
and Sinners of Jackson Square, yeah.
Okay, so it's fascinating to me, and maybe this is just the way you are because you're open to things. But like the way that one phone call had an effect on your life. You go to New Orleans and something happens, and that has an effect on your life.
Right.
Which leads you down this other path.
Right.
Of discovering street musicians, and maybe that's not the right term for it, but enough that it makes you want to document who these musicians are, and you spend a bunch of time filming and creating a documentary on them.
Yeah.
Totally unplanned, I presume. Not something you thought you would do.
Just like everything else, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, what would happen is the seed for that, I suspect, I would do these gigs with Yo-Yo or whoever, Carnegie Hall, play these places, and, oh, what are you up to? I'm like, I met these people, and you tell them, they're like, oh, where can I find? It's Kenneth. He doesn't have a CD, and he's playing, I couldn't find anywhere to tell these people. I wanted to get these guys at Carnegie Hall because I felt and still feel, but there's a lot to deal with. But I felt like, the feeling like these guys are just like Yo-Yo Ma to me. And I don't say that lightly because I have a lot of respect for Yo-Yo. And, but these guys are the same.
Can you explain that? Like what?
Just the energy and the spirit with which they made music. There's just a childlike quality, a loving quality, a community quality, a spirit that transcends everything. It's not an accident that New Orleans is what it is in the world. It's because people feel connected. They plug in, their minds are blown. And it's not, people think it's the music, but I suspect that it's not. It's the fact that people, the joy connects them on some. I mean, I've seen like a businessman from Japan dancing with a homeless person. Here's something that I should have brought this up in the film. I'll tell you something. This is like this will put it in a nutshell. I was playing on the street by a place called Aunt Sally's with a friend of mine who the film is really dedicated to. Ricky Paulin. Still upsets me because he was young and he passed away. Right, the film was like his last performance, his public performance. And I was playing with him, a guy called Stackman, Elliot Callier. And these guys had toured around the world. They don't talk about it. Stackman played with Fat Stop. Like, these guys they did things in the music. They like talk about playing basketball at Nelson Mandela's house in South Africa. Like, not like every day. Like, you just stumble on that in conversation and they throw that out. Or like, oh yeah, we were drinking with James Brown down at the, like, these guys, it's not, that's why you say street musicians. These guys lived a million lifetimes compared to anything I did. So I'm there with Ricky, Malcolm, tuba player, you know, a small group, maybe 5 musicians. And when you were rolling with these guys, when the set started, it was a train. It didn't stop for nothing. We saw horse-drawn carriages crash, car accidents, buildings crumble, buildings fall down while we were playing, you know, down the block. Things happen. Nothing stops these guys. So we were sitting there playing. This guy with 2 young girls, you know, maybe young teenagers, come up. They're holding a box. The father's holding a box. We're playing a tune. The guy, I don't remember if Ricky went over to the guy went over, whispered. I think the guy came over to Ricky, who was sitting on a bench, and asked him what I meant. He said, "Can you play a song?" Ricky puts up his hand, stops the band. So I'm like, he said, we're going to play Just a Closer Walk with Thee, which is like important hymn in African American tradition, and in New Orleans it's like played many, many times a day. It's like a, you know, even on the street, it's an important piece of music. We start playing, they start crying, and in that box was the ashes of their mother and the guy's wife that they were going to put in the Mississippi River right after that. So that's what happens in New Orleans.
Where can we see this movie? Is it available?
Well, it did tour the festival circuit, you know, some of what we were talking about before. I got licenses for, there were a few copyright things in there that I got licensed for a film festival thing back, I forget what year it toured that, but it got shown on some screens around the world, and but it needs a home. So that's, you know, and I'm not skilled at the business side of seeking that stuff out. I'm always looking for opportunities and mention to people, you know, about the film, and that, you know, it's looking for a distributor or a way to get onto the streaming platforms. But right now, it's only distributed via me by a private link. So get in touch if you want to see it. Maybe I can arrange for a screening. So yeah, that's where that's at.
What did you learn from that process of making this movie with these musicians, and how did it change you?
Whew. Well, the first thing I'm thinking about when you ask that question is like when I first knew I had to do this, I was playing in a nightclub on Frenchman Street with a band that I worked with for pretty much the whole time I was in New Orleans. That's really an institution at this point, the Panorama Jazz Band, which are made up of mostly people who are not from New Orleans, but have invested their lives into learning the music and have lived there for decades. So I was sitting in that club like, there was a voice that said, you gotta put something together for these guys to do. You know, I didn't know what it was going to be, but I was like, I have to get these guys to Carnegie Hall. So, the first I started talking to my wife about it, I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, my son was like a year or two, maybe 3 years old at the time. And I used to take him on the street and he used to sit and listen to Ricky in that place by Aunt Sally's, like when he was 6 months old, right in the thing, and on the sidewalk. So I was like, yeah, and Gabriel can come. And my wife's like, yeah, right. But I'm like, yeah, you know. So I did everything. You know, the first part of it was arranging a couple of concerts in Gainesville where I had some, you know, kind of street cred, probably the only place. Because what happened is we moved to New Orleans, and then shortly after that, I was on TV with the New York Philharmonic at the New Year's Eve gala with Yo-Yo doing this piece that we were talking about before. That was with him. And I don't advertise about it. Like, I didn't tell anybody. You know, we left, and then people go, why didn't you tell us? Oh my God, you got to come back to Gainesville, you know. So it was a great opportunity because I could use what you know, the little momentum I had there with that, and then also the momentum of what I was doing in New Orleans and celebrating these people. So I felt there was a great studio. It all kind of came together. Friends of mine in Gainesville were calling saying, there's a new studio that's opened up. It's a performance space. They also have 5 cameras and da 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 da. So I worked through all that, and then, you know, I had to figure out the finances of that, and then transport and motel. You know, it was just me working out all this stuff. And then, you know, I knew who was going to go because they were important musicians that had shown me a lot of, you know, generosity of spirit. And, you know, but these guys also have some of them have a lot of baggage that they bring because they've all lived lives that you or I couldn't imagine. I mean, Kenneth, you know, was wading through the waters of the Superdome, you know, and Katrina looking for insulin for his wife who was like going to die. You know, like just, you know, I could. So they have issues, you know, trying to deal with reality, self-medicating and stuff. And so by the time it was arriving that we were leaving for Gainesville, I knew that Gabriel was not coming with us, and thank God that didn't happen. Because I'm thinking, oh, they can pass him around in the van, and you know he'll have this amazing. Holy shit! So we get to Gainesville, and you know I'm not going to get into it because I actually don't get into it. It's inferenced in the film, but I didn't want to make the film about this. But let's just say that certain things happened the first night, and I basically had to fire Kenneth. And I can't tell you enough about this guy. You know, I mean, it was crazy because I was mortified by the things that happened because it was like people that I didn't know super well, but that had heard about my reputation being with the New York Philharmonic and like, you know, I worked really hard at doing this, and we sold out all the shows. Like I worked, and then for this to happen, I lost it because there was a lot of pressure that I wasn't acknowledging. I remember the first show that was like heading in this direction. They were still successful shows, which is what's crazy because I thought it was the end of the world. That people still dug the show, even though it was like a train wreck. But I remember going out, and this is Ricky. Whose dad was Doc Paul. Ricky comes from an important family in the evolution of New Orleans music. His dad was a famous band leader in New Orleans. It was recorded by the Smithsonian and thing, Doc Paul. But he came out, he was a tall guy, and I remember just being, again, this is like another New Orleans month, because I'm like it was the break of the break in between the two sets, and I just went out. And I go to them. They were hanging out in the back. I said, well, let's get through this last set. He looks at me and he goes, get through this. He goes, we came here to share music with these people. We're not going to get through this. He goes, we're going to go out there and do what we came here to do. It's like a light. I mean, it was amazing because I was lost in the drama of what had happened. But what the real gift of that thing, and what's amazing to me, because if you would have told me that somebody could do something like this to me, like what happened with Kenneth at this place and the things that I had to do and how, traumatic it was, and that I could still love him in the deepest way possible, I would have been like, there's no way somebody do that to you. You never want to be around that person again or talk to them ever again. And that's how, in my younger years, I would have written that person off and never spoken to them again. But Kenneth is like one of my closest people. He's a part of my family. So that was something amazing. And then it was also amazing, there's so many things. I mean, I could still, I'm sure, mine more things out of it if I really started analyzing it. What was amazing is Kenneth is such a huge character. I mean, I could have a whole podcast about him. I mean, he would always tell me, like, he'd call me when I first met and be like, I'm on a bus. I'm like, where are you going? No, I'm on a bus. And then he'd hang up. And then I'd go and see him, and we'd be sitting playing music, and a bus would go by, and his face would be on the side of the bus. I'm at the airport. Where are you going? I'm at the airport. He hangs up. I have to fly out 2 weeks later. I go to the airport. There's a huge billboard. Welcome to New Orleans. His face is on it. It came to a head when he called me. He's like, I'm on the cups. I'm on the cup. On the cup? What do you... He hangs up. I go out there the next morning. All these people coming up to him. Kenneth, man, you must be rolling it. And somebody comes up with this cup from Popeye's Chicken. It's a Mardi Gras Christmas promotion that they're doing. He's on the cup. He doesn't get any money for any of this. So I said, okay, Kenneth, we're going to find an attorney. And I found an attorney with him. We went in, and the woman was like, you're not going to see, this isn't going to trial. You're going to get go-away money. Because it was Popeyes and Coca-Cola. I'm sure it was like a $100,000 ad campaign and they just rip off his thing. So sure enough, that's what happened. What's amazing, this is why I go back to, how can we be under the illusion that we are in control of any of this stuff? The night I fired him, the next morning, I got a call from the attorney. She said, we've got a settlement letter from Popeyes and Coca-Cola. And I stopped right there. I said, listen. I said, unfortunately, I have to step back from anything. And I was like this calm about it. Like it was a tranquility. I didn't tell her I was like, this is what need. And I said, there is a person who I know who is responsible enough to look out for him. Here's her name. I don't want to, don't tell me anything else. I don't want to know anything. I'm very happy for him. The timing is like, how is that? So there was a lot learned that way. The other thing I was going to say is what was fascinating is that Kenneth's such a large personality because he is a vessel. He's like the photographers just see him and know like that's New Orleans for whatever reason and rip him off just like they do with some of the other guys. But what was amazing is with me firing him, it allowed two other guys who are also vessels, but maybe not recognized as much as Kenneth for whatever reason. Dwayne Burns, who is an amazing, beautiful vocalist, my wife's favorite in New Orleans, and great trumpeter. And Ricky Paulin, who was also an amazing vocalist and phenomenal clarinet player. It let them step up more on that second night because I only could use 2 cuts from the first night. It was so bad. Even though the audience thought it was great. I mean, Kenneth, I could only use 2 cuts. Thank God I booked 2 shows. So 2 cuts, and all the other ones were from the second night. So, and it was Ricky's last. Thank God I had that because Ricky did some things. And we talk about it in the film. Me and Stackman, who's, connected. He's like part African-American and part Native American. He's an amazing guy who's got his pulse on stuff. And he's like, yeah, sometimes when people know they're dying and they tell you, because Ricky did this whole thing. It's insane. We was towards the end of the show, the second night. We finished this song where he ripped this solo. That's just ridiculous. And he starts humming. And he's like, invites everybody on. I've never heard him do anything like this, ever. He starts humming. He's like, my father used to tell us, all good things must come to an end. And he said, gets people to hum again. He goes, if you're humming, he goes, that means you had a good time. And we had a good time here. Just crazy. Crazy to me. And I believe he died of lung cancer. Not entirely sure, but you would never know that he was sick that night. He just played his ass off, sang his ass off, and then had those parting words.
How do you navigate? Like, we were talking about this before, about what your idea of what you might have pursued when you went to school and become a pianist or joined a progressive rock band or whatever. What I see in your career right now, I mean, I just saw you play with the Bonafide Scoundrels. You have an album coming out with a band called Triad. Yeah. You're doing work with symphonies. How do you navigate your career? How do you, just what you've told us is so many different things and so varied.
Well, does a surfer navigate? They just balance, man. Just got to try to keep balanced. I don't know how to do that. It's just like I was very seriously into yoga for 10 years. So that certainly helped. I mean, it's also helped my physical body. If I didn't do yoga, I would be a mess right now with the accordion because it's such a physical instrument. It helped me maintain. I really want to get back into it. It's just having trouble.
Is one arm bigger than the other?
Yeah, slightly. The left side, the bellows pumping side is bigger. Like my wife has pointed out through pictures sometimes taken. She's like, look, it's not, super noticeable, but it is. So I don't really know about navigating.
Do you care? Like, is it just you just open yourself up to opportunities and just follow your heart?
Yeah, I have a really close friend that was also part of my Berkeley experience, even though he wasn't from Berkeley. Amazing guitar player, David Brown. Really my favorite guitar player. Had such a sense of groove. In Gloucester, and he always would say, preparation meets opportunity.
Which makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, you just got to keep going, and then this stuff had come, But I really do think it's more like surfing. There's a big wave, and this is our moment that we're on the wave, and you just stay on your board and see where the wave takes you. You're going to come into shore, which the shore is kind of death, right? The ocean, it's interesting. I mean, what's really funny now that I'm saying these words are coming out of my mouth, and it's not anything I've said before. My dad was really into the Beach Boys, and he gave me all the records. I was really into the Beach Boys when I was 4 or 5, and then all through youth, because I was fascinated with the history of my father, I'm sure. But I also really liked the music and the harmonies, the sound of it. So it's interesting. So we're surfing a wave. It's usually considered the other way around, right? Like the river, or we're moving into the sea. The sea is death. We reunite with everything and come one. But this is a reverse thing. The ocean is now, we're on, the moment is the wave, and we just get into shore. And that's it.
Well, okay, so the other thing I want to ask you is you've played a lot of different places in front of a van with 2 women, to Carnegie Hall, to Lincoln Center, to huge festival stages, to small bars.
Yeah.
Does it matter where you are?
No, not at all. It's the quality of the vibration. It's not how many people or where you're at. You know, of course, I was excited to play Carnegie Hall because it's funny. The Carnegie Hall thing, oh, it's another story. There's always, you get older, I guess the stories just keep. But I mean, I had a woman that was friends with my grandmother that gave me a book before I went up to Berkeley, like The Power of Belief or something, and I started reading it. She was a real magical woman. And we used to hang out. It was funny. She was like a friend, even though she was so much older than I was. And it suggested, it was like, put a piece, you know, write something down, a goal, and put it everywhere you look, in your mirror, in your bathroom, your wallet, da, da, da. So I'm sitting there thinking, oh, Carnegie Hall. I'm from Long Island, you know, that's the big, practice, Carnegie Hall. You know, it's like, you hear that. It's like a goal. So I wrote Carnegie. You put a thing, put a da. 10 years later, through complete accidents, you know, I mean, maybe not complete, but like just total. I told you some of them, through Osvaldo, I'm playing Carnegie Hall. And what's crazy is that woman showed up, sent me a message right before I went on stage. Crazy. So, you know, yeah, I could, you know, at that time, I also had a different idea about things then. It was way before New Orleans or anything. So it doesn't matter. I mean, some of the most powerful music making experiences I had were on the street in New Orleans. I mean, if it's probably the number one thing. I mean, I guess it shifts. But that story that I shared to you about the guy with his two daughters,
mm-hmm.
How are you going to put a point on that? There's somebody that you're like facilitating them saying goodbye to their mother and their life partner. And you're part of that process as a musician. That's my blessing. And they're putting a $20 bill in our box. So, does it matter where I'm playing? No.
At this stage in your career, are there goals? Are there things you want to do?
Well, it's funny, you know, they're not goal, because my goal is to listen more, you know, that's the biggest thing, you know, and maybe I'm making excuses, maybe I'm lazy, I don't know, you know, I wonder, you know, like, oh, am I lazy, should I do more, you know, like maybe I'm lazy, that's why I don't set a goal, or I'm afraid, you know, that my goal isn't going to happen, so I don't do, I doubt that's the case, but, you know, that's always whispering in the background as potential, but I'm really grateful for where I'm living now, as we've talked about, like, you know, that I left New Orleans and, you know, I thought I was going to get into my own stuff, which I am, you know, coming back to things that were important to me before I willingly got lost in New Orleans. But I also got introduced to this amazing indigenous population that is making music and celebrating culture that has mesmerized me in a similar way that the New Orleans thing has. So if there is a goal, I would say that it is getting deeper into that. And of course, I met somebody already that is acknowledged as a master Native American flute player and flute maker who I've started some kind of relationship with, and I really hope that develops. I haven't made music with him yet, but I've spent a beautiful time with him and listened to him, and we spent hours together talking. And that's a relationship that I really hope blossoms, and I hope that I can make music with this person or even just hang out with them. Because I believe strongly after seeing these people. I mean, I've been around them through the years, but not living where they're from. So it's like almost a daily thing that I'm confronted with now where I'm living. But I believe, and I have more suspicions than beliefs because at this stage, you know, I'm not sure of anything. But this is a belief. I believe that the kind of knowing and experience and the language, the language that comes out of their mouth, the way these people communicate, is an energy that we as a race of people need to get in balance with. They've been marginalized. That voice has been marginalized, and in some areas of the world has been made extinct, because language is how you form your understanding of reality. They have a completely different language that gives us as a race of people access to a perspective on reality that has been marginalized by our arrogant way of thinking as Westerners, and what we as a people believe we needed to do to inhabit North America, by, wiping these people out and their cultures, which is evidence, which is amazing, because that's the university my wife works at, is an Indian school where that kind of thing went on. So that's what I care about, man. I want my son to be able to hang out with these people. So he has, because it's similar to the energy in New Orleans. The energy in New Orleans, which is more of an African energy, there's a lot of parallels. There's some unique things to the indigenous that is not shared with the New Orleans energy, but it's similar. So that's my only goal. I don't really care. I mean, whether I play accordion or, I love the accordion. That particular instrument that you've seen me with on a few occasions is like an extension of my body after the Gig 365 experience. It's not even like an instrument. It's like I've gotten a new accordion and I can't even play it because I have such a relationship, with the instrument that has been with me for over 20 years. But I would let it go in a second if I got the word that's what I'm supposed to do.
You were saying the place where you live in is at the top of Mississippi. Yeah.
That's also just, one other project that I have that you didn't mention, which is really important to me, is this thing called Music at the Center of the River. And we're slowly releasing things. We're going to release the whole record in the winter of this year. And, it's important to me I was thinking about it when I was talking about the surfing, because music at the center of the river. Well, what is the center of the river? It's like all those, it's very deep, questions, and exploring through music that idea. So it's got a big New Orleans connection, because that's where the three of us met. And what was the question? I'm sorry. Oh, the source of the Mississippi. Yeah. So yeah, I had been through Gig 365 that year. I traveled along the Mississippi River, and it flooded that year, which was amazing. I saw houses underwater in Mississippi. It was crazy. I got diverted off of Highway 61 because it had flooded. But I went and performed at Lake Itasca that year, and that was the first year I went to the source of the Mississippi, and it was, amazing to say the least. Also to have that breadth in 1 year, to see the flooding and the power of the Mississippi, to go to the lake where it just kind of comes out. You could walk across it, and then be down in New Orleans where, and I played at the end of the Mississippi River that year too, at a place called Cocodrie at a general store, Cecil Laperouse's general store, which is an amazing gig. That was awesome because it led to other gigs. So now here we are, and we didn't intentionally set out. This was an opportunity that was offered to my wife, and we didn't even know she had a bunch of other opportunities. What was going to happen? We wind up moving to this place, Morris, which is surrounded by indigenous people, the Dakota and the Sioux Nation, as the white man called Dakota and Lakota peoples, from my understanding. And we're 2.5 hours from Lake Itasca. So we've already gone. We went with my son, who we had visited Minneapolis like 2 or 3 years ago, and we had a few spare days. We went up there with him and went in the water. It was the summertime, so he had been there once before. But now we're right there. We went. His birthday is December 31st, so we went on January 1, and there was hardly anybody there. It was all frozen, and it was just like, man, I want to spend a lot of time there. It's a magical place, as you might imagine. It's where the river is an important,
You have a song called Mississippi.
I do. Yeah, we just recorded it with the Music at the Center of the River. There's going to be another version, which I'm really... man, when I heard it, it was like, wow. I was like, I've recorded it a few times, but I'm really happy with, feel it's a blessing really with this latest recording that'll come out in the winter. Yeah, that song, because I put out a record called Gig 365, and what it is it's music that was important to me during that year. It wasn't necessarily music that I played, although some of it was, but it was music that was important to me, and music that I wrote during that year, and then it was interspersed with conversations that I had that were meaningful that year. Because some people think, oh, did I record it while that happened? No, I did do videos and recordings every day, which was insane. But I did not record that record that year. I did record some other records that year, crazily. But that came a year after. And what's awesome about it is that half of the record I recorded with my friend Yanitsa and his people in Romania, which was, mind-blowing. One of the most profound music recording experiences I've ever had. And then the other half is with Jamie Haddad. These are like people that go back to Berkeley and really back to like probably before I was born, just the spirit and nature of them. And that record, I put it out, no promotion, not like it was a blip, but if that. But what happened was I recorded a version of St. James Infirmary, which has a personal history with me, which goes back to before the Groenbox thing in London. I'd seen somebody play that song and it just resonated in a pub in London, and I just made connections with, man, it sounds like a gypsy tune. How could a blues song? I mean, it just reminded me of that. And I always imagined that I would do it with them if I was lucky enough. I never imagined that I would actually have the opportunity to record with Unitsa and friends. But that arrangement, I wound up transcribing all the parts of it for a group that I was working with years ago. I used to work with them off an Eighth Blackbird, an amazing contemporary chamber music ensemble based out of Chicago. And we performed it, and then I had started working with the Yo-Yo's Silk Road Ensemble, and they were doing a record, and one of their violin guys, amazing musician, Johnny Gandelsman, asked me to do an arrangement for them of the same thing. So, I was sure to, on all the arrangements, on the score for the thing, the first page is like, this is all from these guys. I had the idea to do it with them in that way came through me, but the actual notes and things other than what I played and sang came from those guys in the moment. And they're insane. I mean, I explained to them what I wanted to do, and we went through it. I think we went through it once and it kind of broke down, maybe twice. I can't remember exactly, but that's like at most, the take that's on the record is either the second or third take. It was all live. And I remember Yanitsa, because he kind of has more of a modern sound with his wife. So he records in a modern way. Everything's isolated. And I remember, and it was amazing that I stood up to him because I have so much like reverence for him. But he was like, let's be in separate rooms. And I said, Yanitsa, that's not the kind of thing I want to do. I want us all to be in the same room. I don't care if it, thank God, because we got stuffed into this room that's like, I don't know, like the size of your kitchen over there. Like we were on top of each other. The big cymbalum. God, man. It's funny because, part of me is happy that we didn't, because there's a certain mystique to it. But if we had videoed that, it would have been amazing. Like to be able to look back on that as a thing, because nothing was changed or added. It was like what you hear on the record is exactly what happened. And they were burning.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you so much for doing this. Such short notice.
Thank you. So good to see you again.
It's
Next
great to see
time,
you.
we'll be able to have a drink and be like, remember when we hung out?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.